Christmas dinner has a way of freezing moments in amber, the smell of glazed ham, the clink of cutlery, too many people packed around a table pretending this is warmth, not obligation. That night, I was 38, sitting in my usual seat near the end of my parents' dining table, wine glass steady in my hand, heart strangely calm. Everyone was there: my parents, my sister and her husband, aunts, uncles, the whole picture-perfect setup: green bean casserole going cold, chairs pulled too close together, forced laughter that hadn't found its rhythm yet. Nobody was eating. Forks hovered, chewing was forgotten, like the room itself was holding its breath. I noticed everything. My husband was unusually quiet, not nervous exactly, focused, like he'd made a decision and was bracing himself for the aftermath. My sister avoided my eyes entirely, busying herself in the kitchen, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. We sat down, plates were passed, someone commented on the ham, another person made a joke that landed flat. Forks moved, but no one seemed hungry. Then my husband set his fork down, not gently, not casually. It landed with a dull final clunk against the plate. I need to say something. Every voice stopped. Even the background music felt too loud suddenly. I didn't look at him right away. I stared at my plate instead, at the way the gravy had pooled along the edge, unmoving. "I can't keep this inside anymore," he said, voice trembling in a way that sounded rehearsed. "I didn't want you finding out like this, but I'm in love with someone else." A pause, a dramatic one, the kind people think gives their confession weight. Then he said it. "I'm in love with your sister." The silence that followed was absolute. Not shocked silence, not confused silence, the kind of silence that lands when something irreversible has just happened. My mother inhaled sharply. My father froze mid-reach for his glass. My sister went pale, eyes flicking to me and then away. Her husband looked between us, lost, like he was trying to understand a language he'd never learned. I lifted my wine glass and took a measured sip. "Thanks for telling me," I said. The sound of my voice seemed to snap something in the room. "What?" my husband asked, blinking. "Thanks," I repeated. "I appreciate the honesty. It's just a little late." His mouth opened, then closed. "What do you mean?" I set my glass down carefully, reached beneath my chair. My fingers closed around the folder I'd placed there earlier that day. "I mean," I said, standing now, "I've known for a while." Every head turned toward me. I found the texts, the hotel receipts, the lies. I've been aware for months. My sister made a small sound, half gasp, half denial. "I didn't confront you," I continued, voice steady, "because I needed time to handle things properly." I slid the folder across the table toward her. "I'm buying you out of the business." Her eyes dropped to the papers. Her hands shook as she flipped them open. Full valuations, independent appraisals, legal language highlighted in neat tabs. You can't be serious," she said. "I am," I replied. "You have your notice period per our partnership agreement. Accept the buyout at fair market value, or we proceed with a forced sale." Her husband stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly. "What is this? What are you talking about?" "She's been sleeping with my husband," I said calmly, "and using company money to do it." The room erupted. Denials. Gasps. My mother crying. My father demanding explanations. My husband reaching for my arm. "We can fix this," he said urgently. "I'll end it. We'll do real counseling." "We've been to 6 sessions," I replied, pulling my arm away. 6 sessions where you lied to the counselor's face while continuing the affair, all documented. His face drained of color. "And," I added, looking straight at him, "I filed for divorce last week." He blinked hard, like the words didn't fit the story he'd rehearsed, like he'd expected the confession to make him look brave, like confessing first would control the narrative. "You filed for divorce?" he whispered. "Yes." I gathered my coat, hands steady despite the way my pulse had finally started to kick. "Your things are packed," I said to him. "I arranged a storage unit and prepaid it. Keys and details are with the paperwork. Don't come to the house." "Come too." I looked at my parents next. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this," I said quietly, but I wasn't given much choice. No one stopped me as I walked out. The cold air outside hit my lungs like a release. My hands shook when I started the car, but I smiled. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting in the dark. I was done pretending. I didn't marry him because he was dramatic or charming in the obvious ways. I married him because he felt safe. We met the way people do when they aren't looking for anything life-altering. A mutual friend's birthday, a bar that was too loud, a conversation that stretched longer than either of us expected. He listened. He asked questions. He remembered small details. What I ordered, how I took my coffee, the story about my first job that I'd told like it was a joke, but meant like a confession. At the time, my life was steady. Not glamorous, not chaotic, just built. I had helped grow the family construction business alongside my sister for years, navigating job sites and contracts in a world that didn't always take me seriously. I was used to proving myself quietly, used to being the responsible one. He fit into that rhythm easily. He admired my work ethic, said he liked that I didn't need rescuing, that I knew who I was. When he proposed, it wasn't flashy, just us, a ring, a promise that sounded simple but felt solid. I said yes, without hesitation. Marriage settled into something comfortable, shared calendars, inside jokes, the kind of stability people don't post about because it looks boring from the outside, but feels like safety when you're inside it. My sister was always part of that picture. She and I had built the business together from the ground up. Long days, late nights, arguments that ended in laughter because neither of us took things personally for long. She had married young. Her husband was decent, quiet, the kind of man who stayed in the background and let her shine. We spent holidays together, birthdays, Sunday dinners that blurred into routine. Looking back, that's what unsettles me most. How normal everything felt while something rotten was growing underneath. The first cracks weren't explosive, they were subtle, almost polite. My husband started working late more often. Not suspicious late, plausible late. I didn't question it. Trust was the default setting of my marriage. He talked about feeling disconnected, about stress, about wanting to work on things. We started seeing a marriage counselor, his idea. I admired that about him at the time, thought it meant commitment. What I didn't know then was that every session where he held my hand and talked about rebuilding was followed by messages I wasn't supposed to see. Hotel receipts tucked into business expenses. Smiles exchanged across rooms when they thought I wasn't looking. My sister had always been affectionate, warm, physical. That wasn't new. What changed was the way she avoided my eyes afterward, the way conversations went quiet when I entered, the way she laughed too hard at things he said. I noticed. I just didn't want to know. When the truth finally landed in my lap, through a combination of misplaced phones and careless screenshots, I didn't scream. I didn't confront them in the moment. I sat on the edge of my bed and felt something settle inside me. Clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was months of choices made behind my back by the two people who knew me best. So I stopped reacting and started preparing. I documented everything. The messages, the receipts, the lies told in counseling sessions. I met with a lawyer quietly, reviewed our partnership agreement with my sister, one our father had insisted on years ago, specifically to avoid family drama poisoning the business. I didn't rush. I didn't warn them. I let them believe I was still trying, still hopeful, still unaware. Once you know the truth, the world doesn't change all at once. It fractures quietly. I became aware of this pauses first, the half seconds where conversations stalled when I walked into a room, the way my husband's phone screen dimmed too quickly when I passed behind him, the way my sister laughed a beat too late, like she was catching up to a joke she'd already told somewhere else. None of it was dramatic enough to accuse, all of it was wrong enough to remember. At home, my husband was careful, almost gentle. He asked how my day was. He initiated conversations about the future, about vacations we might take, about fixing things, always vague, always forward-facing. He held my hand in counseling sessions, eyes earnest, voice steady as he talked about commitment and honesty. I watched him perform sincerity like a role. The counselor nodded, took notes, asked us to communicate more openly. He agreed enthusiastically. And then, hours later, he sent my sister a message about how convincing he thought he'd sounded. I didn't interrupt the illusion. I let the lies stack up because I wanted to see how far they'd take them. Because every lie told to my face was another brick in the wall I was building quietly around myself. The business started to feel different, too. Invoices that didn't quite line up. Expenses submitted without much explanation. A hotel charge buried under a generic site visit. I recognized the place immediately. A boutique's hotel 2 towns over. Romantic. Not near any job site we owned. I pulled statements late at night when the house was quiet. Cross-referenced dates, locations, credit card charges. It didn't take long. They weren't just betraying me emotionally. They were careless enough to use company money to do it. That was when anger finally showed up. Not the kind that makes you reckless, the kind that sharpens your focus. My sister avoided one-on-one conversations. When we were alone, she filled the silence with small talk, work updates, traffic complaints, anything but eye contact, anything but substance. Her husband noticed. I could see it in the way he watched her, the way his questions lingered in the air unanswered. He hadn't connected the dots yet, but suspicion was circling him like a low hum. At family gatherings, my husband and sister positioned themselves carefully. Never too close, never too far. Just enough distance to look innocent. Just enough proximity to reassure each other. I started testing the edges. I changed my schedule without telling them. Noticed how quickly they adapted. I asked questions casually about where he'd been, who she'd seen. Their stories aligned too smoothly, like they'd rehearsed. They were careful. They just didn't realize I was listening differently now. At night, lying beside my husband, I watched the ceiling and let myself imagine what they thought the endgame was. Did they picture me devastated? Furious? Did they think I'd beg? Forgive? Step aside quietly so they could slide into something they'd already stolen? The audacity of it settled heavy in my chest. I thought about the business we'd built, the contracts I'd negotiated, the weekends I'd given up to keep everything running. I thought about how easily they assumed I'd be the one to lose the most. That assumption became their biggest mistake. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted control. So I kept collecting, kept smiling when I had to, kept letting them underestimate me. Every suspicious charge, every lie told in therapy, every text deleted too slowly. By the time Christmas arrived, I wasn't sitting at that table as a wife about to be blindsided. I was sitting there as someone who already knew exactly how this story ended. They just hadn't realized yet that I was the one holding the pen. The drive home felt unreal, like I was watching myself from somewhere above the windshield. Streetlights blurred past. My hands stayed tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Only when I pulled into my driveway did the adrenaline finally crash. I sat there for a long moment, engine still running, heart pounding in uneven bursts. Not panic. Release. Inside the house, everything looked exactly the same. Shoes by the door, mail on the counter, the faint scent of the candle I'd lit that morning without realizing it might be the last time I did so as a wife. I locked the door behind me, checked it twice. Then I leaned back against it and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. My phone buzzed almost immediately. His name. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Another call, then another. A text followed. Please, we need to talk. I didn't plan it like this. I laughed once, a short, humorless sound that surprised me with how sharp it was. Didn't plan it like this. As if the months of secrecy, the rehearsed confession, the dramatic pause at the dinner table had all just happened to him. I dropped my phone on the counter and poured myself a glass of water. My hand trembled slightly. I noticed it, acknowledged it, let it pass. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't move. Another ring, longer this time. I know you're in there, he shouted through the door. You can't just lock me out. I walked to the entryway slowly, deliberately, checked the camera feed on my phone. He stood on the porch, face red, hair disheveled, hands gesturing wildly like this was an argument he could still win if he found the right words. I pressed the intercom. This isn't your house, I said calmly. It never was. What are you talking about? His voice cracked. We're married. I bought this place before we got married. My name is the only one on the deed. Your things aren't here. That's not fair, he snapped. You can't just throw me out. I didn't, I replied. You left the marriage long before tonight. He started pacing, running his hands through his hair, switching tactics. I made a mistake, he said, voice softening. We both know it went too far, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it. You didn't even give me a chance. You had chances, I said quietly. Every time you came home and lied to my face, every time you held my hand in counseling while texting my sister afterward, those were chances. Silence. Then anger. You planned this, he accused. You humiliated me. You humiliated her. No, I said. You humiliated yourselves. I just stopped covering for you. He began pounding on the door. Open this right now! I stepped back and picked up my phone, dialed the non-emergency number, explained the situation calmly, stated the facts. By the time the officers arrived, he'd switched tactics again. Tears, slumped shoulders, victimhood. She locked me out, he told them. I have nowhere to go. One officer looked at me, tired, professional. Ma'am? I handed over the paperwork I'd already set aside. The deed. The divorce filing. The officer nodded, turned back to him. This isn't your property, he said. You need to leave. But, sir, my husband looked past them, eyes wild, landing on the street. My sister's car was parked a little way down, headlights off, waiting to pick him up if the night went the way they'd feared. The officer followed his gaze, then sighed. Looks like you have options. After they left, the quiet felt enormous. My phone exploded. Messages from people who'd already heard some version of the story. Friends, acquaintances, a few family members. You didn't have to do it like that. Everyone makes mistakes. He loves you. Family is family. I sent the same reply to each one. He had an affair with my sister for months, lied repeatedly, including in counseling, used shared resources to do it. I filed for divorce. If you want to support him, that's your choice. I'm done being lied to. Most went quiet. A few doubled down. I blocked those. Later, my parents called. My mother cried. My father sounded exhausted. Your sister wants to talk about the business, he said carefully. There's nothing to talk about, I replied. She has the offer. She knows the agreement. Silence. What do you need from us? He finally asked. Time, I said, and space. When the call ended, I walked through the house, room by room, letting myself really see it. Mine. That night, lying alone in bed, sleep didn't come easily, but neither did regret. I felt bruised, exposed, angry in flashes. But underneath all of it was something solid. I hadn't begged. I hadn't scrambled. I hadn't handed my dignity back to people who'd spent months treating it like collateral. I'd drawn a line. And for the first time since the truth came out, I slept knowing exactly where I stood. The morning after Christmas arrived without ceremony. Pale light through the curtains, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, a world that hadn't stopped spinning just because mine had cracked open. I made coffee, drank it standing at the counter, didn't check my phone. That lasted exactly 10 minutes. When I finally did, it felt like opening a floodgate. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacked on top of each other. My sister, my husband, extended family who hadn't even bothered pretending they'd heard both sides. I listened to one voicemail from my sister before deleting the rest. We need to talk. You blindsided me. This didn't have to be so extreme. Extreme. Using company money to sleep with my husband wasn't extreme. Lying to my face for months wasn't extreme. Confessing at a holiday dinner without warning wasn't extreme. But consequences were. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and went about my day. By noon, my sister had moved on to anger. She called my parents, claimed the valuations were rigged, that I'd manipulated the process, that I was punishing her emotionally through the business. My father called me, voice heavy. She wants to negotiate, he said. There's nothing to negotiate, I replied. 3 independent appraisals. Same number. The partnership agreement is clear. She says she can't afford to buy you out. I know. Silence stretched between us. So you're really going to force a sale? I don't want to, I said honestly, but I will. That afternoon, my husband showed up at the house again. I watched through the camera as he tried the door. Confusion flickered across his face, then anger. He knocked this time, harder than before. Open the door, he demanded. We need to talk like adults. I didn't answer. He started yelling about fairness, about love, about how cold I was being. I called my lawyer instead. Document everything, she reminded me calmly. You're doing fine. By evening, the narrative had started to spread. My sister was telling people I was emotionally distant, that I'd driven my husband away, that she and I had always had tension, and this was just me finally snapping. My husband added his own spin. I was controlling, calculated, vindictive. He said I'd planned this for months, which was true, but not in the way he meant. The problem for them was that people knew me. They'd seen my marriage, spent time in our home, watched me support him when work stressed him out, heard me talk about counseling like it mattered. Their version didn't land the way they'd hoped. One mutual friend called me that night. She's saying you gaslit her for years, he said carefully. Most people aren't buying it. I figured, I replied. Thanks for telling me. Meanwhile, the business situation escalated quickly. My sister hired a lawyer, filed motions claiming the partnership agreement was invalid, that she'd signed under pressure years ago, that the valuations undervalued future growth. My lawyer was unbothered. This is stalling, she told me. The agreement was signed with counsel. The appraisals are solid. She doesn't have much to stand on. What's she trying to do? Either wear you down or find money fast. Neither is likely. I wasn't worried. I'd planned for this. Set aside funds, prepared for a long fight if necessary. I wasn't running on emotion anymore. I was running on documentation. Then came the forensic accountant. My sister claimed I'd been misusing company funds, that I was projecting my own guilt onto her. Fine. I handed over everything. Every transaction I'd ever made was clean, logged, justified. Hers? A mess. Hotel charges disguised as site visits. Personal dinners coded as client meetings when no clients existed. Mileage claims that didn't line up with any job locations. Thousands of dollars siphoned quietly. "This is serious," my lawyer said when the report came back. "This crosses into fraud." "I don't want her arrested," I said. "I just want her out of my business." "Then keep pressing the buyout," she replied. "She's running out of options." My sister tried another approach. She showed up at one of our job sites while I was meeting with a contractor. "We need to talk," she said, pulling me aside. "Not here." "You're really going to do this?" she snapped. "Destroy everything we built over him?" "You destroyed it," I replied evenly. "I'm just finishing the paperwork." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I think I'm done protecting you." The contractor pretended very hard not to listen. She left furious. That night, my parents invited me over for dinner. I knew why. I went anyway. My sister wasn't there. "She's scared," my mother said softly. "She says you're taking this too far." "Too far was sleeping with my husband and stealing from our company," I replied. "I'm being generous." "She's your sister." And she knew exactly who she was betraying. My father stayed quiet until the end. "What do you need from us?" he asked again. "Support," I said, "or at least neutrality." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I added. "I'm asking you not to rewrite reality. Strength looks different when no one is watching." In the weeks after Christmas, I learned that lesson in the loneliest hours. Not in courtrooms, not in arguments, but in the spaces between things. The house felt too big. Rooms echoed when I walked through them. The bed stayed cold on the other side. I slept diagonally without meaning to, like my body was still adjusting to the absence beside me. During the day, I functioned, meetings, emails, calls with my lawyer. Decisions made cleanly, efficiently. Composure had become muscle memory. At night, the cracks showed. I would sit at the kitchen table long after dinner, staring at nothing in particular, replaying moments I hadn't thought mattered at the time. A look held a second too long, a laugh that didn't belong. The way my sister had hugged me goodbye at a family gathering, arms stiff, breath shallow. I wasn't grieving the marriage. That surprised me. What hurt was the realization that the people who knew me best had been watching me trust them and choosing to betray me anyway. One night my sister called. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Her voice was small, tired, stripped of its usual confidence. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "It always goes this far," I replied quietly. "You just didn't think it would reach you." She started crying, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to sound human. "I love him," she said. "I didn't plan it. It just happened." "It happened every time you booked a hotel," I said. "Every time you used company money. Every time you looked me in the eye and lied." Silence. "You're ruining my life," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm refusing to ruin mine to save yours." She hung up. That night, the weight of everything pressed down hard. I thought about childhood. Growing up together, shared secrets, stupid fights, the old assumption that no matter what, we'd always have each other's backs. That assumption was gone. The next morning, I woke up exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. At work, I stared at my screen without absorbing anything. At lunch, I realized I hadn't eaten since the day before. My hand shook slightly when I tried to lift my fork. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. Sat on the closed lid, breathed. For the first time since this started, tears came. Not sobs, just steady, silent tears that slipped down my face without performance. I let them. Because strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means choosing where you break and not letting that fracture dictate your next move. That afternoon, my lawyer called. "They're pushing for delays," she said, "trying to exhaust you." "Are we okay?" I asked. "We're more than okay," she replied. "They're cornered. They just don't know it yet." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about endurance. My husband tried reaching out again that week. New number. A message that slipped through before I could block it. "I miss you. I know I messed up. I still love you." I stared at the words for a long time, then deleted them. Love doesn't look like deception. Love doesn't drain shared resources for hotel rooms. Love doesn't confess only when there's no other option left. That night, alone in the house, I stood in the doorway of what had once been our bedroom and finally let myself acknowledge the truth. This was the lowest point, not because I'd lost them, but because I was standing in the wreckage of relationships I'd believed in, and choosing, every day, not to crawl back into the rubble for comfort. The loneliness was sharp, but it was honest. And somewhere beneath the ache, something else began to form. Resolve. The shift didn't come with a single revelation. It came with confirmation. It happened in a conference room that smelled faintly of stale coffee and copier toner. My lawyer sat across from me, a thick folder open between us, organized the way truth tends to be when it's been respected. "They've boxed themselves in," she said calmly. She slid a document toward me. The forensic accounting report, finalized. Every transaction laid out in black and white. Dates, amounts, locations, cross-referenced with job schedules and client records. No ambiguity left, no room for spin. Hotel charges on weekends with no job sites nearby. Meals for two coded as client dinners when no clients existed. Mileage claims that would have required teleportation. "This isn't just mismanagement," my lawyer continued. "It's fraud." I exhaled slowly. For weeks, I'd been careful not to look like the aggressor, careful not to escalate, careful not to give them something to latch onto emotionally. Now I didn't have to be careful. "What are my options?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "You can push criminal charges, or you can leverage this to finalize the buyout immediately." I pictured my sister's panic, her insistence that this had all gone too far. I pictured my husband's messages, remorse as a bargaining chip. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want closure." My lawyer nodded. "Then this ends now." That afternoon, we sent a formal notice. "One last offer. Firm deadline. Buyout at the agreed valuation, or we proceed with forced sale and reserve the right to pursue fraud claims." No negotiation, no extensions. The response came faster than I expected. My sister called my parents first. Then she called me. Her voice was different this time, stripped of entitlement. "You're serious," she said. "Yes. You'd really do this to me?" "I didn't do this to you," I replied. "You did this to yourself." Silence. "What about family?" she asked weakly. "I protected family for months while you lied to me," I said. "That didn't stop you." She didn't argue, because there was nothing left to argue with. 2 days later, she accepted the buyout. We signed the papers in a lawyer's office that felt intentionally neutral. No windows, no warmth, no space for nostalgia. Just signatures. A check. Clean lines drawn where emotional ones had failed. She didn't look at me. I didn't ask her to. When it was done, I walked out with full ownership of the business I'd helped build. She walked out with enough money to land on her feet, but nowhere near enough to pretend this had been a win. My husband tried one last time. He showed up outside my parents' house when he knew I'd be there for dinner. "We need to talk," he said quietly, pulling me aside. "There's nothing left to say." "You're really choosing this?" he asked. "Money over us?" I looked at him then, really looked. At the man who had lied to me, manipulated therapy, confessed only when cornered, and still thought this was about choosing. "No," I said, "I'm choosing myself." He reached for my arm. I stepped back. "You chose to betray me," I continued. "You don't get to frame my response as cruelty." I walked back inside without waiting for his reply. That night, alone in my house, I stood in the living room and let the quiet settle differently than before. Not hollow. Clear. The truth was out. The power imbalance was gone. The future wasn't something I had to defend anymore. For the first time since this began, I wasn't bracing. I was standing on solid ground. Once the papers were signed, everything moved faster. Not emotionally. Logistically. The business transfer finalized within weeks. My sister's name removed from accounts, contracts updated, authority clarified. Employees noticed the shift immediately, not because I announced it, but because tension has a way of lifting when the source of it is gone. Work got easier. Projects stayed on schedule. Vendors returned calls faster. I hired a new operations manager, competent, disciplined, uninterested in family politics. Revenue climbed quietly, like the company had been waiting for permission to breathe. Meanwhile, the consequences they'd been avoiding began to land. My sister's marriage didn't survive the exposure. Her husband filed for divorce shortly after the buyout finalized. I didn't blame him. I understood exactly what it felt like to realize the person beside you wasn't who you thought they were. She moved out, downsized her life quickly. Friends I'd once seen at every family gathering stopped mentioning her name around me, unsure which side of the silence they were meant to occupy. My divorce moved faster than expected. My husband's lawyer tried for everything. Half the business, alimony, the house. He painted himself as a man abandoned by a cold, calculating wife. The judge wasn't impressed. "You engaged in an affair with your wife's sister," she said flatly. "You used marital resources to facilitate it. You lied repeatedly in marriage counseling while claiming reconciliation. I'm not rewarding that behavior." The ruling was concise. He kept his car, his personal belongings, his retirement account. That was it. No house, no business interest, no alimony. He lost it in the courtroom, raised his voice, accused me of setting traps, of planning everything. The judge shut it down immediately. Your choices created these consequences, she said. We're done here. He stormed out before I even stood. Outside the courthouse, his family waited. They didn't look at me. Later that week, the messages started. From his relatives, from people who'd once toasted us at our wedding. I was vindictive, heartless. How could I destroy a family like that? I blocked them all. I wasn't interested in carrying guilt that didn't belong to me. My own family fractured more quietly. My mother tried to stay neutral, said she loved us both, said she just wanted peace. My father, after seeing the evidence, stopped asking me to reconsider anything. Your sister made her choices, he said one night. So did he. Some extended family drifted away. An aunt who'd always favored my sister stopped calling. A cousin unfriended me without explanation. I noticed. I didn't chase. Months later, my sister sent a message. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed it without replying. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. It doesn't undo months of deception. It doesn't buy you access back into someone's life. My ex-husband tried again too. New number. Different tone. I made a mistake. I see it now. Can we talk? I deleted it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. What surprised me most wasn't how much I'd lost. It was how much lighter life felt without carrying everyone else's chaos. I sold the house a few months later. Too many ghosts. Bought a smaller place closer to work. Clean lines, new routines, mornings that belonged entirely to me. The business thrived. Without constant tension, decisions felt simpler. I expanded into commercial projects, invested in better equipment, hired people who showed up on time and didn't make excuses. Sometimes I heard updates through mutual connections. My sister struggled, moved back in with our parents briefly, took a job far below what she'd once had. She and my ex tried making it work openly after everything settled. It lasted less than a year. Turns out relationships built on betrayal don't magically become stable once the secrecy is gone. He moved out of state. New job, new story. Told people the business just didn't work out. She posted online about growth, healing, second chances. I muted her. None of it was my concern anymore. The fallout wasn't loud. It was quiet, permanent, earned. And as the dust settled, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't standing in the aftermath anymore. I was standing in the beginning of something that was finally mine. It's been over a year since that Christmas dinner. Not the kind of year marked by dramatic milestones or big declarations. Just a quiet accumulation of ordinary days that don't hurt anymore. The business is steady, better than steady. Expanded into projects we never had the bandwidth for before. I hired people who show up, do the work, and leave their chaos at the door. Turns out removing constant dysfunction has a measurable impact on growth. My life shrank in the best way. Fewer people, fewer explanations, fewer compromises made out of guilt instead of choice. I moved into a smaller place, closer to work, easier to maintain. It feels like a reset button I didn't know I needed. Clean mornings, evenings that belong to me. Silence that isn't heavy anymore. I started dating again, slowly, carefully. I tell the truth up front, not the polished version, the real one. Some people disappear when they hear it. That's fine. The ones who stay don't need convincing. Every now and then, my mother brings them up, asks if I'll ever forgive, if we'll ever all be together again. I don't get angry. I don't argue. I just tell her the truth. I don't think about them enough to forgive them. That's not bitterness. It's clarity. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people who never took responsibility, and closure doesn't require reconciliation. Sometimes it just requires distance. Here's what I learned. What no one tells you when betrayal hits this close to home. It's not the affair that breaks you. It's the lies layered on top of it. The planning. The assumption that you're too blind, too loyal, too kind to notice. The way people feel entitled to your silence while benefiting from your trust. That's what cuts deepest. When something feels wrong, trust that instinct. Don't wait for proof that devastates you. Don't wait for permission to protect yourself. And don't let anyone shame you for having boundaries. They needed me to be the villain, the cold wife, the calculating sister. I didn't give them that story. I gave them facts, paperwork, consequences. And then I walked away. That Christmas dinner ended one version of my life. Not gently, not kindly. But it started another, one built on honesty, self-respect, and the quiet power of knowing when to leave. They're living with their choices. I'm living with mine. Mine led somewhere better. And that's enough.